So I work for a small software company in Seattle. I worked part of the Synapse Cat team. So we go out and we help people who've got problems with Synapse. And we'll talk about what Synapse is and the kind of problems they will have. But I thought we'd just have a quick chat and I would just tell you about what's involved in it and get rid of some of the misconceptions. So what is Azure Synapse Analytics? I hear you all cry. And the way we find that out is we go to a website. What is Azure Synapse Analytics? There we go. I don't really need to read all that out to you. But essentially, so from us as people, as human beings, Azure Synapse is a collection of services that all sit together in one workspace. So it's from that point of view, it's very simple. The services include SQL dedicated pool, SQL serverless pool, Apache Spark, Azure Data Explorer, there's a studio, there's storage, there's networking, Purview is included, machine learning is included, Power BI is added on. There's all these all together to go to make up Azure Synapse. So why am I telling you that? Is because if you go into the portal, I then go to here, I can see Azure Synapse Analytics. So that is, if you're going to create one, that is the service you want. Now, a little while ago, what we did as Microsoft, we took SQL dedicated pools, or they were called SQL Data Warehouse. We took SQL Data Warehouse and renamed it Azure Synapse Analytics. And then a bit later on, we renamed Azure SQL Data Warehouse to be SQL Dedicated Pools. And then we changed what Azure Synapse Analytics was. So when people talk about Synapse, a lot of the time, they're actually just talking about the dedicated pool. So whenever I talk to customers, people say, oh, my Synapse is slow. Yeah, my first question is, what do you mean by Synapse? Is it the dedicated pool, the serverless pool, the ADX pool? Is it Cosmos? Is it the, what's slow? They normally mean dedicated pool. But I just wanted to just clarify that. So there are these two different things. They're related, but essentially, if you wanted to create the SQL Data Warehouse that we used to have, that's the one you click on. And if you want to create Azure Synapse Analytics, this is the one you go to. And so we're going to create one. So before we go into any major detail on sort of what it is, how it works, let's go and create something. So let's go create a resource group. Actually, let's use an existing resource group. I think it's much nicer to show stuff rather than just go walking through the slides, because all the slides do is to show you this. Thank you, and a test. So my workspace name. So we're going to call this virtual group region, where I'm going to put it. So let's say North Europe. Then the only thing service that we effectively need to create when we're creating a workspace, we don't really know what a workspace is. A workspace is just a collection of services. There is the very minimum we need to create is a storage account. I'm going to create a brand new storage account. We'll call this virtual storage. Okay. And then the file system. So all the details about my workspace are going to be stored on that storage account. Then we can go to security. And let's never save that. We're going to be asked about our SQL admin login. Now, this is just initially for the serverless pool. So we will get what we call SQL serverless pool with our workspace. We get that by default. So I've got to put in a username and password. So I'm always going to type that in and get that wrong. What I can do is I can encrypt my workspace. So if you are just testing stuff out and just playing, don't worry about encrypt unless you really need it. For most dev environments, you don't need to worry about having, double encryption and encryption keys. But you can turn it on, and then you can say, well, my encryption key is going to come from my key vault, and this is where it is in my key vault, and this is my system assigned or user assigned. So it's easy to say, right, if I'm just testing stuff out, disable it. So we're just making things simple from the beginning, because you get asked questions. So if I'm just creating a workspace and I've never created one before, I suddenly come here and go, oh no, what do? Let's have a look. Yes, I can move it. Okay. So this is going to give me a little bit of information, but there are certain things that get enabled and disabled when I turn this on. So there's also, well, I'm going to go into a managed virtual network. I'm going to allow all my connections. If you've done anything so far with Workspaces, this is a relatively new feature. We didn't force a minimum version of TLS, just so you know. And then I'm just going to hit create. And effectively, it just creates a template. This is just a template for my workspace. It just goes and creates it. And there's very little in it. Right, we're going to go back to my web page. So we just created a workspace. Now, we get for free, we get that storage account, but I can add extra storage accounts in, and I'll show you how to do that. We get a serverless pool. And then what's the point of a serverless pool? We'll go into that in a bit more detail. I can create a dedicated pool, so a SQL data warehouse. I can have multiple SQL data warehouses if I'd like. I get an Apache Spark pool, or I can have multiple Apache Spark, and I'll say pools, but really they're templates. And I'll show you, and we'll create one just to give you that sort of feel. And Azure Data Explorer. That's a really new service, and we'll spend a few minutes on it later. I won't do that now because we'll just go in and have a little play. So most of the details are sort of on here. So really, just go to Google with Bing using your favorite search engine, Azure Synapse Analytics, and this should be the first page that comes up. This is what we're interested in seeing about. And then what's new? Okay, so I always forget about this. So we have 2 sites to find out what's new. So this is what's recently come this month. And then we have the archive, which is here. So I do open a new tab. So these are all the things that have been released in January. So so these are previous updates. Any bug fix and things come out there. And then this should be the updates for March. We also have, let me see, did I close it? Here it is. The Azure Synapse YouTube channel. So the updates for March are in here. So if you don't want to read, you can just go to the YouTube channel and watch them. So each month the updates come out. Also, if we look for Azure Synapse blog, let's hope we don't get signed while this blog come up. There we are. And so we have the March update there. So if you want to see what's just come out, this is also another good way of learning. These are all the details. I think I had a look at this yesterday. And I went, oh, look, I didn't know that had gone generally available, and that we've done some fixes in CTAS. So I wasn't aware of this. So this is quite useful, even for us internal people who think we know everything. So it's always worth checking out the blogs. I think that's about that. YouTube channel. There's also another place to get information, and I'll show you that as we're going along. So we've just created a workspace. Or I haven't, I just hit, oh, okay, I didn't do this. Okay. So while this is creating, I just wanted to highlight, so serverless SQL, there's a cost $5 per terabyte. So we can talk about serverless SQL when we're in the engine, but I just wanted to point out that there is a version of SQL that has no server. We just pay for data processed. So we can show you that very quickly. So I will go to the portal, and in the tradition of Blue Peter, here's one I created earlier. So here is my workspace. So inside my workspace, I've got some details here. I've got my Azure Active Directory, properties. I've got my pools here. So this is my SQL pool. So this is my built-in pool. This is the serverless pool. I get this for free. This is my Gen 2 pool. This is one I've created. So I've gone in here and I've given it a name, that's group. If you're ever going to create a dedicated pool, put that down to 100, please. For my sake, and mostly your sake. You can see that it's only $1.50. But when I hit create, and it goes to create it, because I'm just preparing it in advance, it will start and it will be running. And the default size is a 1,000, which is $15 an hour. And if you leave that $15 an hour server running over the weekend, so you create it on a Friday, as you do, you leave $15 running for 2 days, you've got $700 bill. And the reason why I know that is because I did that a couple of times on my MSDN subscription, and I wasn't best pleased. Okay, where were we? The workspace. So I'm going to create, it's going to create another pool, another dedicated pool. The dedicated pool part is the SQL data warehouse, the MPP engine. So just out of interest, anyone in the chat use the SQL data warehouse or the dedicated pool? That'd be very useful to know. And that $5 per terabyte is for the serverless pool, and we'll cover that in a sec when we get into the studio. So we're building up to it. This is my dedicated pool. It's running at a 100, and the new one will just suddenly appear like magic in there. We also have the ability to create Apache Spark pools. So some of you may be familiar with this small startup called Databricks. I think it's Databricks. It's something like Databricks. They have a hosted Spark service. We have a hosted Spark service. Which service is going to win? There's only one way to find out, and that's let them fight. Well, not really. So, sorry, that for Harry Hill fans, that's all that bit was. Our Spark service is slightly different from the Databricks Spark service. So when you create a Spark cluster in Databricks, you actually get a physical server that's running. And then you can auto start and stop that service. Our Spark service is a job service. What you do is you specify a cluster template. So when I hit new here, I'm not actually going to create a machine. What this is actually a template for a cluster. I can tell it in exactly the same way how big it's going to be, how much it's going to scale, our executors. I can see the price range it's going to be. I can say, right, it's going to auto pause, it's going to disable, or you can turn it off. But generally, you're going to leave it on. You can see which version of Spark we want to run, which version of Delta Lake, which version of .NET for Apache Spark we're running. And then we hit create. And all that's doing is effectively creating an ARM template that's going to be then used. If I want to run a Spark job, we tell that Spark job run against this cluster template, and it will then spin up that template. I'll then use it and then drop it. And if I run another job, it's going to use that same cluster that I've already got running, or it will create, if I don't have one running, it will create another one. But if you or someone else wants to create and run a Spark job, and I'm running one on my template, my cluster, you will get your own. So we're not sharing those resources. We'll get those individually. So that's a difference you just need to be aware of. And also you need to be aware of that we don't open up the Spark port for that Spark cluster. So there's no real way for you to connect into it to run if it's a Spark SQL query or run a query to then pull out data. You use effectively our serverless pool to do that. So I'll show you sort of roughly how that works. And so here, that was so quick because we're not creating a Spark cluster. Then down in here, we'll go back to, where are we? All good. Ah, look, people use dedicated pool. Well, if one person uses a dedicated pool, thank you. So, and then we've got this new thing that's improved preview Azure Data Explorer Pools. Now, Data Explorer is also just like dedicated pools and just like serverless pools and just like Spark pools. It's another MPP cluster, but it is designed for high volume ingestion. So things like getting IoT or logs, telemetry, things like that. It is really good at. It is so good at, it's what we use inside Microsoft. But you'll see that we call it Custo because that's the language you use to query it. So the Custo language. So it's a very, very nice, it's another language to learn, but actually it's very simple to learn. It might take you a little while to get your head around it. If you have a programming background, you'll probably find it quite easy. But if for ingesting massive amounts of data, querying it, logs, telemetry, Azure Data Explorer, is perfect for that. We have had people say, well, you've got two MPP engines, you've got the dedicated pool, you've got Azure Data Explorer. Which one should I be using? If you've got an MPP engine that you can auto start, auto pause, which you auto scale, online scaling with Data Explorer, why would I want to use a dedicated pool? Because dedicated pool, because the Data Explorer pool is not designed for huge long running queries. It has lots of really cool sexy cache going on. So all your data is held close to the machine. So huge ranges of data, massive long running queries, joining tables and transactional updates. It's not great at. It's not what it was built for. So it's not optimized for it. As where that is, transactional updates, huge long running queries, batch processing is what the dedicated pool is used for. So when you are looking at Synapse Workspace and you're going, which is the right pool for my workload? The answer is, it depends. Depends on the workload, depends on the volume of data, depends on the type of stuff coming in, and it may change over time. So depending on the volume you have right now, you might pick serverless, and then you might go, well, actually now I need stuff changed over the last 6 months, I need a dedicated pool. Or I might go to, my workload has changed, I need a Data Explorer pool, or I really need a Spark now. So just be aware, there is no easy way of going, I definitely need this. I mean, there's some rules of thumb, but that's how it works. And I think I've actually created one. So in here, I created this one earlier. I can click on it and you go in, you create a database, and then you have this wizard to actually just start data ingestion. So if I just click on it, it will just go straight in to the UI, and I can start doing things like ingest data. I can create tables. I create external tables, which is just tables over the file system. I can click. I can pick services. So I can go, right, where do I want to go into a new table. I'm going to pick my source, which it can be from a file, from a blob, from an ADLS, from Event Hub. And then I can pick the event hubs, and I can pick the files, whatever suits me. So I can even just upload files just to test stuff out, or just use a blob. Or I can go to, this is my container. I'm going to do a one-time and continuous grab from that folder structure. Or I can load in loads of historical data. It's really it's a really cool service. So it's worth, even if you're not planning on using it right now, having a play. And if you Google with Bing, as ADX free cluster, you can also get a free version of it that you can then play with. If I go back to homepage, in fact, where is it, query? If I just go onto here, and if I have a look at COVID, I just put that there. If I now do run, that's going to pull back everything from that table. There are no rows in that table. That's not very helpful. Right. There we go. So there's some rows in that table. And then I can say where full IntelliSense, where country, and I'll do contains and then just do you. So we're only going to dabble because we don't really have enough time to dig into each service, but this is new and this is something that everybody in our team uses and looks at pretty much on a daily basis. Right, so we've covered, let's go back to our workspace. We've covered just those pools very quickly. We can do encryption, which, just so you know, you have to set it up when you create the workspace. So for my dev workspaces, it's fine, but for my other workspaces, you've got to know what you're doing. So only set encryption up when you know what you're doing. Don't do what some of our customers have done, is they'll create a workspace and then halfway through their production deployment, they'll suddenly decide they need encryption, and then we have to effectively go, well, you need to unencrypt everything. Well, you need to take that, create a new workspace, move all your data across, and then re-encrypt it. So just be careful, that's all. Networking, we can set up firewalls, we can set up VNets, identity. What was that? I can add user, that was relatively new. What feature? For my own user assigned identity. Private endpoints, if you're using them. Auditing, so always turn on auditing. Whatever you do, that's really just basic. Defender, so this has been called a few things over time. So this was security and a few other things. So this is kind of Defender. This is the report that comes out every month about any possible attacks on your data warehouse. Monitoring alerts. Diagnostic settings is important. So what I've done is I've said, right, this information goes to a log analytics, goes to a Custo workspace. So I can send it to Custo, log analytics. I can send this stuff to a storage account. The reason why you try and set this up from the very beginning is because if you're debugging something and you go, oh, I really could use that diagnostic information, and then suddenly you find you haven't turned it on, you can't retrospectively add it. All right, we're not going to cover any of that. We're going to get to the good bit. So this is the main screen. You go into, this is my dedicated endpoint, so my dedicated pool. Now, it's always there, even if you haven't created one, just so you know. This is my serverless endpoint. What else is useful on here? That's about it. Okay. Yeah, there's my virtual group. That one's created. These are my templates. That's my Explorer pool. I'm going to click on this, Open Synapse Studio. So our homepage. So the idea is we come in here. This gives us our main tasks that we're going to do. Ingest data, explore, analyze. Bit boring. So on here, we've got all the things in my workspace and any linked services that I have. So in my workspace, I've got that Azure Data Explorer that we saw. External tables. We should have, oh, there's not one in my test DB. This is one I've created for me. The other one was in test. If I've got a lake database, we haven't covered lake databases. That's a relatively new feature. And then SQL databases. So these include my dedicated pool, but also this is my dedicated pool, also includes my serverless pools. And this is my linked or storage account. If I use, there's a service called Azure Synapse Link, and that works with, I'm just getting my script out, Cosmos, Hive, Cosmos normal queries, and Cosmos analytical store, Dataverse, and there's a private, SQL Server will work at some point in the future. So it's been announced on SQL Server 2022. There'll be a feature that you just sync it up, the SQL Server with your Synapse Workspace, and any of those tables that you're syncing up will just automatically just appear in Synapse. So the Synapse Link essentially is a service that sits on top of, it's written by the teams that have Cosmos, Dataverse, SQL Server. They do all the hard work. They effectively move that data onto an area that's sort of hidden from us, and then we can query that with our Synapse service. So that is it's all automatic. It's all done set up by wizards. So you don't have to set up any ETL. You just go, well, I want to query that data. I want to join data from my Cosmos with some Hive tables, and then join that again with some stuff from my file system, with some stuff in a folder, and then eventually with some tables that are in SQL Server. I can then do that. But let's start with something really simple. So let's go to our serverless pool. Let's pick this folder. So this is my storage accounts, and I've added these in, and these are essentially linked services. So this is just a service. This is just a storage account that I've added in, and then I get to go and see it. And if I go to a particular folder, let's go in here. Let's go into there. I'm going to pick a small file. Let's pick customer. So this is some TCP/H data. So if I right click on that, I can preview it so I can see roughly what's in it. So it's just a CSV file, nothing really nice. But I can right click, I can go to new script, and I can then select from it. It builds this query for me, and then all I need to do is hit run. So what that's done is that's queried, open this CSV file, queried it, just returned the top 100 rows. And I can do something like that. And I can say, well, how many lines are in that file? Not very many. I can do things like select star. I can do things like view my customer. I can spell it right. My customer as. Here we go. It's gonna complain, or it should complain because I'm in master. So I really want to put that into a database. So what I'm going to go do is go over to my workspace. Go under here. Let's do add. We'll create a SQL database. We'll create a serverless one, and we'll call this virtual. Just to show you, I've not pre-prepared anything. So now I'm going to go to here. Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that to appear, just so you know. I was expecting to hit refresh. So that's going to create this in virtual. And then I can do select from my customer, telesense as well. But I can do things like sum, I can join. So this is a view. So what we could probably do is if I wanted to, let's say, put Power BI over the top, I can simply just connect it to this serverless database, connect Power BI up, and then just tell it to read from this view, other views, which essentially are just files or folders. I'm doing this. So this is a particular file. I can change that to be a folder, or I can change it to be multiple folders. So then it's a really simple way of getting data into Power BI with doing very, very little effort. So we're accessing this serverless DB from this user interface, but you're going to ask me a question like, well, can I do it from Management Studio? And the answer is yes. It is just a standard tabular data stream, TDS endpoint. So this is the one here. It's on demand. I'm going in as me. I can, if I do refresh, I should get virtual. There we go. I can look at my views, and then I can run it. So any client that talks SQL Server will just work. Obviously, this is just my DUF data, just to demonstrate, and it's not particularly a lot. But at SQL Bits, I did a demo with Stan. We were showing you can query 1.4 billion rows I think we got it down to about 2 or 3 seconds into a Power BI report. So we, by using filtering, by organizing the Parquet files, by using Parquet, using using stats that are inside the Parquet file to optimize it, you can get it really fast over quite large data volumes. But if I was running constant queries like you might do over a database over the serverless cluster, so I'll show you something here. Let me go back here. So I've run this query a few times. If I go on to monitor, actually see those queries running, and I can see how much data is processed. So that $5 per terabyte, this is what it will be referring and going back to. So I've queried, and you can see that when I did a top 1000, it was exactly the same as when I ran the count, then I ran top 100. The file is just this big. So it doesn't matter whether I said 1000, it's going to pull back this. And when I'm counting them, it's still going to pull back things. So it's the file size is the key bit to it. And you can see the time is slightly inconsistent because there is some caching going on. So the first time you query it, it will cache some of the files. Then when you run it again and it's still hot, you'll get some improvement on performance. But you just need to be aware that it's a CSV file. So even if I put a where clause on, it's still got to read the entire CSV file. If I had a Parquet file, then it wouldn't need to do that. You can filter columns, you can exclude columns from Parquet because it's a column compressed format. So what we recommend is that if you've got CSV files and you're going to query them a lot, convert them into Parquet files. Serverless, I love. Serverless is great. I spend most of my time in dedicated pools, but I really love the serverless model. So any kind of queries come in here. There's even new DMVs for serverless. So just be just aware that serverless is slightly different from dedicated pools. If you are familiar with SQL Server, the DMVs are similar to SQL Server. They're less similar to dedicated pool. So let's go back to my query. Let's go back into here. So this is Synapse Studio. This is the sexy stuff. So if I'm going to go into here, what I did is I went and I looked at that storage account. I can look at different storage accounts. Sorry, the demo gods are a bit slow today. If I just want to upload a new file, I can pick a file. I can pick. So if I'm just don't know what I'm doing, I can just pick a new file like that. I can just upload it into here and I can query it. What I can also do with the ability to query is there we have some functions in serverless which allow you to pull out the name and the folder. It's a function called file path. We can actually pull out parts of the file name as well. So if I want to look for all files in a particular folder, I can go and do that. So if I've got dated folders and I wanted everything in January, I could look through multiple years and pull back everything in January. So we have the ability to effectively push those predicates down, which is something that serverless can do really well, but something that our dedicated pool struggles with. So really quickly, what I did, so this time I just uploaded a file, my own file up there. I just right-clicked and then I went to explore and it just opened that file up. And it's just given me some information about it. So I can explore the file system and files really quickly. So that is just a tiny taste that's just a start of the dedicated pools. But I can also right click and go, well, I want to use Spark. So I'm going to load that to a data frame. So let's pick our template. Let's pick this one. I'm going to, if I've got an existing session, it will connect to it. If not, it will start to create one. So this may take a few seconds. So Spark isn't my wheelhouse. I've used it a few times. I've played with it. If this is your thing, then certainly you'll love this. If you use Spark, PySQL, there are These are the languages we currently support. If you see one missing, that's probably coming. There's a chance that's coming soon. So this will take a little bit longer because the first time it's actually doing something, it's actually starting a Spark cluster. And that's the same for anything where you're having to start the cluster. So just be aware of that. So that's going to go away and it's going to take a few seconds. But one of the things about Studio that's really nice is that I can then flip back to here. I can do some more work here. You know, I go something like the IntelliSense is header row, and I say something like it's true. I'm just guessing. Will that sort my header out, or will that just mess it up? Oh, great. Now it knows what my header row is. I can do really weird stuff now. I can sum the scene because I've got nothing better to do than to pad through it while we're waiting for our Spark cluster to run. Oh, there's also some other really cool stuff like in here. So if I do this, run it again. I can also chart it. Now it looks pretty. I'm not sure quite what this chart means. There's a number at the bottom. You know, the legend is the Husky name address. It's clearly not the most appropriate type of chart, but it looks good. It saves me effort. There we go. How does that look? The best chart is always a pie chart. Let's pick. No. Yeah, it's not going to work, is it? Pie charts are terrible. We don't like pie charts anymore. Right. So hopefully our Spark cluster takes about 3 or 4 minutes to start the Spark cluster. Something that I've not talked about. You can see the execution of the Spark job here. And I've not set up is we can link this workspace up with Git. And then from there, we can use that to push to different environments. So every time we check something in, every time we make a change, that we can then simply just push that into the workspace, into the Git repo. Then we can then build our different environments and do deployments from dev, test, etc. So we have customers who use pretty much everything in Synapse Workspace. And they use the deployment, they get on with it really well because they're doing everything in the way that it kind of works. We also have some other customers, just to be honest, that have a very particular way they want Git to work. They have a very particular way that their organization works. And then that sometimes has a little bit of a friction in the way that our stuff is set up. So we just work with customers to try and the best balance. Let's have a look. So that's now created my Apache Spark pool. So it took 3 minutes, 9 seconds to run that really simple query. And if I run it again, we haven't got to wait for the overhead of the pool to start up. In fact, I think we have just released the preview of smart caching as well. So that now took, how long is that? 7 seconds. So that effectively 3 minutes with just for the Spark cluster to start up. What I can do though, from here, and this is something that I haven't shown. So imagine I'm really clever and I've typed in, this is my Spark job and I'm going to do spark.save or whatever, spark.save, and then I try and save it to a particular location and I've got a nice Spark script. There's a button just up here called Add to Pipeline. So if I click on, so we can do this. This is quite nice, comments. So I can add comments into, I can pick on this, and then I can add a comment saying, my comment. Sort of hidden away. Really, really sort of useful feature if you've got multiple people working on the same workbook. I click on this, add to pipeline, and I can create a new pipeline. Then what happens is so this feature here, which is the pipelines, or looks very much like ADF. Shh, don't tell anybody. creates a pipeline, adds a notebook to it, puts in the settings the notebook that we're executing to. So it puts this task on here, and we can say, right, I want to pick up the pool dynamically, or I want it to run against this pool. Then I can then schedule this to run on a trigger. So very, very quickly, you can go from, well, I've got a file here. I want to do some work on it. I go to here. This will create, let's pick pool. Did I pick small or pool? I'll put one. Never mind. I've got my notebook, and then within seconds I can go, well, that notebook, I'm going to actually create a new pipeline because I want to schedule it, and then all I can do is click on it, settings, run against small test, and then hit add a trigger, and I can then execute it. So very quickly I've gone from and in that example I've gone right from storage to Spark cluster to ADF pipelines really quickly with very little knowledge and very little skill. I can just put stuff together all in this one user interface. Now before this I'd use probably Management Studio to do my SQL work. I might use Data Explorer, or I might use Azure Data Studio to some of the notebook stuff. I'd then go into the website. I'd use Storage Explorer to do the stuff to upload the file. And then I would use ADF to then create the notebooks, to execute the notebooks. And I'd use lots of tools. So this is sort of bringing all that into one lovely place. So I don't have very much longer, but I wanted to show you something else that is relatively new, and it's this thing called lake databases. So if I go here and I choose add, you get this lake database. Now, I don't know if I had all these other tabs open up here because I wanted to show you things like OPENROWSET. So OPENROWSET is the command that Serverless uses. Just be really careful, because if you search for OPENROWSET, there is a version of it for SQL Server and there is a version for Serverless, and they are different. So I wanted you to just be aware of that. So in here, in data, sorry, I got distracted by myself. So in lake databases, I can choose to add a table, and I can choose from a template. What do I do now? So I'm going to add stuff from a template. Does anyone in the chat window want to put in what template should I pick up? So a little while ago, Microsoft bought a company that created all these effectively data models, these templates. So if no one's put anything in the chat window, I will just pick freight. Okay, freight and logistics. Continue. Now, just happened to be freight and logistics. It could be anything. It gives me all the objects it thinks could be part of a freight and logistics data model. So I can search, but I can go down and go, well, we probably need some accounting. And then it will tell me these are the columns. So this is what it's for. These are the columns, and these are the kind of relationships. But I've not added anyone else in. So, but if I add in more, I mean, clearly I should know what I'm doing. I'm just randomly clicking on things just to show you kind of what you can do. So now you start seeing, well, here's the picture. I mean, this looks very much like, I don't want to say Visio, but I'm saying Visio. And it's now building a data model for us with all the primary keys, all the foreign keys, all the relationships, all the metadata all set up. So I can just simply go, oh, I can add in all these other ones. I can just pick and choose. I can create my own, but I'm just going to add those just for the period of time. So here they are. So these are the tables that I've chosen to add. And this is my lake database. So what will happen is that this is where it's going to put it on my default storage. It's going to put it in this folder, or I can change it. So it's going to store the files in text delimited. So effectively, what this does is this sets up the schema and the metadata and effectively folders and some JSON that describes how the model is going to look. But underneath each one of these, the data will be stored in Parquet. So then anything else can come along and query those Parquet files. So what you've done is we created a database over the lake in an open format that anyone can read and understand. And because these are standard models, well, I can use it, and then someone else in my same organization can use it. They can create their own data warehouse, their own lake database based upon these, or database template based upon these. But then people in other organizations can do exactly the same thing. And you know that so they haven't customized it, their balance sheet looks exactly the same as this. So it's a common language that all people using Synapse can talk. Then essentially we save it, then I can start pushing data into it. Then I can start querying it. So I think I've got one here, but I don't believe I've got any data in it. But if I just right click on a table, I can just select if I had some data. And this is a kind of the format it gives it in. So here's my database. So I can also do cross database queries if I had different, because they're just stored over the file system. So it's a really kind of nice way of bringing things together, and in a nice way, this is sort of the way the future will be going. I see this sort of taking off. We just need to get people learning about this and knowing about this. We've got a modeling tool in here, a graphical modeling tool that's going to save people a lot of time and effort. And I think I've covered source control. I haven't really touched dedicated pools, but that's my wheelhouse. So if you want to talk to me separately. We covered a bit about Spark. We covered a bit about ADX. We covered a bit about Synapse Link. We covered a little bit about the storage. We covered a bit about the workspaces. We covered a bit about where to find information on the blogs and the videos. And I forgot one, so actually that's a good idea. Here we go. Underneath here, updates. This is where you will also see updates appearing, as well as on the blog. So just this is another place to check out. So just wanted to, just reminded myself of that while I was busy. And I think that's probably a good place to end it.
We have a couple of questions, both from the chat, which we consolidated, and other ones. So Mark, do you do the first one?
I certainly can do. So can you share a Synapse workspace across multiple Synapse instances? And would you want to?
Do you want the simple answer? No.
Totally up to you.
No. Can you share stuff around? So you can't share the workspace. The workspace is an object, but many people can use that workspace. So so you could share that workspace with 5 or 6 developers. So I have a workspace that I share with someone else, and for demos, we put stuff in there and we work together. So sharing a workspace between a team is great. You can then check in the code into GitHub, etc. Sharing assets across workspaces, that's a slightly different question, and that's where we generally become a bit stuck. Most of the services are not. So the dedicated pool you can't share across workspaces. And that's generally the question that we get asked. So I'd rather jump on that first and say no. But the serverless pool and the custo, you can. And Spark, well, it just runs over files, so everything is shared. So the resources in it, most of them you can share.
Great stuff.
Cool. Next question would be something about the costs. Do you have some more general comments about specific costs, pitfalls, or what does it cost me on average to try it out?
So the workspace will be pretty cheap because the workspace doesn't cost you anything. So you can create those. And if you keep a very small storage account, you don't have masses amount, that's going to be cheap as well, because we all know storage in the cloud is cheap. The Spark clusters you can keep small, so you can see exactly how much you're going to spend per job. The dedicated pool, if you're testing it out, ideally keep it at a 100, unless you want to scale it up and test it. There's a few tricks that, you get charged per hour. So if you scale it up, you get charged for that hour. So if you scale up for 10 minutes and then scale back down, you're still going to pay for that entire hour. People say it's very expensive because it looks very expensive, and it's pretty, well, all right, let's face it, it's quite expensive, but what you're getting is actually quite a lot. So if I just we'll just go to here and we'll just go to a new dedicated. Let's pick my dedicated pool. In fact, okay. So you can see here. You see the costing is quite small, but that's 1/20th of a server. So you don't really see good performance. You see all right performance, but you see best performance. Starting at 500. That's where I get an entire compute node. So that's where you get an entire compute node to yourself. Otherwise, you're potentially sharing it with other people. And for that, you get 300 gig of RAM, 1.5 terabytes of SSD. The storage is charged separately, but the storage is just at normal storage costs. So for 300 gig of RAM, in fact, you actually get 2 machines, but we don't really talk about the control node. So you're really getting 2 machines, but we effectively are charging you only for 1. So 300 gig of RAM. If you tried to spin up a VM of 300 gig of RAM, I think it might cost more than $7 an hour. And if you consider that each machine is running SQL as well, which is how it works, it's all SQL, SQL all the way down. Could you get a SQL license for that? If you were running this, could you really get a SQL license for $1 an hour, $1.50? So for what you're getting, it is very cost effective. Even when you go to the big sizes, because when you compare us with the other big MPP systems, the Oracle Exadata, the Netezers, the Teradatas, the Google BigQueries, then it's pretty cost effective. But if you're playing around with it, it's very hard because that does add up, especially if you're not pausing it. So one trick, so if you're playing around with it, go to my YouTube channel, not my website, but my YouTube, this one. Now, one of the videos is auto pausing the DW. Which one is it? Come on. Which one you are? No. One of these is, there we go. There's pausing and resuming. So we can set an auto pause up. And so that's what I do on my one. So if there's no activity on that dedicated pool, so it checks every 10, 20 minutes. There's no activity, no queries running, it shuts it down. And therefore, I save money because even if I scale up and I'm running 2 nodes, it will shut it down pretty quickly. The only frustrating thing is every 10 minutes, the blooming thing shuts down, then I have to keep restarting it. But it is very simple to do. It's what I haven't done and what I've written a script to do. I've got a PowerShell script. I haven't shared it with anyone. It will just go through all the dedicated pools in your subscription, and then try and shut them down, whether you own them or not. That's slightly more dangerous because you don't want to shut down your production one. But just be aware.
Yeah, good.
The cost, and I don't know about the cost for ADX, for Azure Data Explorer. But if you Google with Bing, free Data Explorer cluster, you can get a free Data Explorer cluster. So if you want to have a play, this is, for free. What more do you want? Obviously you want everything for free. I know that, but essentially this is free. So I've set one of these up as well. If you want to learn Custo, and there's test data in there. I even go to here, which is what we were looking at before. This is a free cluster. there's test data, so you don't even have to worry about it. Yeah. You might take a little while to learn how to use Custo, but you can see that just writing a where clause like that. If I can do where again, you know, I can do group, things like group by. You don't do, you have to do it in a slightly different way, where you, I don't think you use, I can't remember what the Custo term is. But there is also a T-SQL interface for Custo. So I can connect to my Custo cluster, just like I can do with SQL, with Management Explorer and Power BI, and I can just query it in exactly the same way. So even if I don't want to learn the Custo language, I can still connect to a Custo cluster and query it.
Perfect. So that would be the last of our question. And thanks to everybody for joining us, and a big thanks to Mark.
I was going to wave bye. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for putting up with the ums and ahs.